Alright, quick review time here for Vanuatu 2nd edition. So, like usual, if you want to see the rules and playthrough videos, click on the link below. Alright, so to get this one started, let's just talk about the main mechanism, just in case you've never played before, so you know what we're talking about. It's sort of an odd mix between an auction and programming style of game, if you can even imagine that. You're going to be spending a bulk of your game assigning your action discs up here on the action row. And this is the programming part of it, because then you're going to go through a following phase where you're activating those spots. But it's also sort of an auction game because the amount of action discs on each spot actually makes a gigantic difference, because you'll only be able to activate spots where you have the most amount of discs. So that's the auction style part of it. And that's where the ruthlessness of the game is. But we'll get to that later in the review. Let's start off by talking about the components, art, graphic design, iconography, all that stuff. It's pretty stellar across the board. Not much to complain about, really. I love the island theme, that's great. The colors they use and the art on the board really pops. I love the player colors, it's not the usual stuff. The art of the characters is really good, especially compared to the first edition. It is night and day. I would definitely suggest you to get the second edition if you are interested in this game. Don't seek out the first edition, it looks pretty bad. Talking about components, not much to complain about as well. Just as a side note, these might be the thickest cardboard chits I've ever seen in any board game ever. It's all super thick across the board. Maybe a little too thick, because there's starting to be a bit of damage, especially if you drop some on the floor. You know, you get meeples for fish, treasure, just a couple of things to really nitpick about. I wish they didn't use these sorry meeples for the visitors. I wish they were actually regular meeples. It would fit modern board games more. And maybe these good cubes couldn't have been cubes. Maybe we could have actually got the components for those goods, but it is what it is. Those are just some small nitpicks. It just looks really good, and it just pops on the table. Alright, with that out of the way, let's talk about the dichotomy, which is the theme versus the way the game actually plays. Now the theme, like you can see, you're on an island, vacationing, fishing, relaxing. But my god, this game plays completely different. This is probably the most cutthroat and unforgiving game I have ever played. It's really unlike most modern board games where you're in your own little silo, working your engine, barely interacting with the other players. This one is all about the interaction. It plays more like an old school board game where it's low on the rule set, easy to teach, but really high on the player interaction, which is on the programming side of things up there on the board. Alright, I mean, the best way for me to sort of explain to you how cutthroat this is with a couple of examples, to be honest with you. For example, you know, the main mechanism of this game is you can only activate an action if you have the most discs there, right? But if you've programmed your discs in a way where you want to move, but then you have to fish, but guess what? When it comes to your turn, you don't have the most meeples on the move action, but you do on the fishing action. Well, then you might be forced to actually do fishing, which does absolutely nothing for you because there is no fish where you are, and then you can end up moving later on when you don't really want to move. So it's a game where, you know, the way the pawns are placed, if you didn't plan correctly, you are going to have a bad time. You can lose complete turns, and that's super unforgiving, and a lot of people are not going to like that. But if you know that going into this game, I think you're really going to enjoy it. Alright, let's talk about the player count for 2 seconds, because there is a gigantic difference in the way the game plays, whether you're 3 to 5 players, because the game doesn't scale at all, whether you're 3 or 5. So at 3 players, it's not that cutthroat. It's very friendly. It's a Care Bear type of game. You're pretty much going to get whatever you want to get done on the top row. Not much issue. Most of the time, all the players just put all their 5 pawns or max 2 in a specific area. You'll be fine. But as you go up to 5 players, this game turns into like a groan machine, I like to use as a term, where, you know, every single person's going to be putting a pawn up there and everyone's going to be groaning. It's like, why did you put it there? And, you know, you got to double think what other people are trying to do and place extra pawns, and you can screw people over, like I mentioned, by, you know, doubling up in a specific area and then activating it last, so nobody in that area can actually perform that action until you performed it, and that's fantastic. Alright, what else do I love about this game? I already mentioned that the rule set is really simple. The teach is really fast. None of the actions are super complicated. Everything's straightforward. The actions, it's not like a Vital Lacerda game where you have to cascade 3-4 different things together to get a minor thing done. This one is you go get treasure, you go get fish, you exchange fish into money, build a hut. Everything is super straightforward. It won't take more than 5 minutes to explain this game. I like that you're always engaged. It's one of those games where you need to pay attention to every single pawn that's hitting the action board, every single action that's being on the main board. You are paying attention. You are going to react to what everyone's doing, try to get in a better position. All right. I think that's about it. Just a couple of, I think, negatives to the game. To me, they're not really negatives, but keep this in mind. There's no catch-up mechanism at all. If you're losing in the third, fourth round, you could be looking at that scoreboard and think, you know what, I'm completely out of this, and you're just going to be spinning your wheels for the next 6, 7 rounds. It's that type of game. Know that going in. I do think the game is a tad on the long side. I wish it would have been only 6 or 7 rounds. 8 seems a bit on the high side. This game will work better if it clocked in at about an hour 15. Right now it's clocking in at about an hour and a half to 2 hours, depending on the player count. That's a bit too much. All right, so what's my score overall? I think I'd give this a 5 out of 6. Knife fights in a telephone booth. It is really cutthroat. Know that going in, but it is a really enjoyable game if you are into that sort of thing with your friends. All right, so there's my review. We'll see you in the next one. Again, like usual, click on the links below if you want to see the playthrough and the rules videos. We'll see you in the next one. Later.